And we're back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast, bringing you our fourth segment, which is going to be talking about Patrick Sandoval and his injury for the rest of the year with the Los Angeles Angels, and just overall talking about the Angels as well. I really have not talked about the Angels much since Mike Trout got hurt, or in a small part of my power rankings, just because there really hasn't been much to talk about. But with Sandoval getting Tommy John and being out for the year, I did want to dedicate some time today to talking about Sandoval and just the Angels as well. A very interesting team, and it will be very interesting to watch for the rest of the year. So yeah, let's get into it. So news did come out, I believe it was last night, that Patrick Sandoval would end up getting Tommy John surgery for the Angels, and that would be the route that happened. He is going to be out until at least 2026, so of course he's missing the rest of this year, the rest of next year as well. So obviously significant blow to this Angels team. Sandoval more was a guy who was looking to be a big-time trade piece for some teams. Doesn't have the best stats, but again has kind of a live arm, has a lot of great stuff, and maybe that's why he got Tommy John, but has been a guy that really has not lived up to expectations ever since he came up to the big leagues. But a lot of teams still like the potential he shows, and with pitching being at such a thin amount at this deadline this year, I mean, every team needs pitching, so of course no one has pitching. So Sandoval was looking to be one of the biggest pieces at this deadline, potentially being moved, potentially being talked about, but of course now is not going to end up being moved considering Tommy John. So yeah, an interesting situation here for the Angels, and unfortunate injury for them. But yeah, let's just talk about it, and also talk about the Angels as well. So looking at Sandoval this year, he had thrown 79 innings, had a K per 9 at 9.15, up from last year. His walk per 9 was down from last year as well at 3.95, which is still a lot. I mean, walking almost 4 players per 9 is pretty bad, but better than last year. Quick question from the comments, actually, so we'll go to that. He said, who do you like tonight, Yankees or Mets? So for tonight, I think I'm going to end up going with the Yankees. I just think with all the momentum that is happening with them, they've been pretty bad as of recently, losing 7 out of their last 10, going 3-7 in their last 10. So I do think they're going to be looking a little lively tonight with Garrett Cole on the mound as well, his second start. I do think they'll end up getting the W, but the Mets have been really good as of recently as well. So I also think that there is going to be a good game tonight overall, and I think that both these teams are going to end up being a fight. But I do think the Yankees pull it out just for the pitching advantage. I think Cole is a significantly better pitcher than Peterson, and I think they're going to be doing really, really well today, just because they want to make sure they do better than what they have done these past 10 games and being embarrassed by the Orioles. So going back to Sandoval now, though, again, his walks per 9 were down from last year, so I think that overall there is a lot of potential here with this arm. You look at his ERA, it is at 4.11, which is, again, not great. He had 2.91 last year, so it's worse than last year, obviously. His expected ERA is also worse at 4.70. His FIP is at 4.18. So also, not great. But again, I think his fastball slider combination is very nice. Some good off speed as well. So I still think there's a lot to like here if you are a team with Sandoval. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to trade for him, of course, but Sandoval just is a guy that really has a live arm, was never able to put it together, and this year was really a big part of that as well. So going back to another question from the comments here, Yankees can't hit lefties, Mets win 3-2. That's fair. I do think they should be improved with lefties now. J.D. Davis coming in as a trade guy from the A's, he should help with the lefties. But Peterson also isn't the greatest pitcher, so I do think that there is lefties, and then there's lefties who aren't that great, like David Peterson. But again, should be an exciting game. I think both teams are really fantastic, and I'm just very, very excited to end up watching it. So with Sandoval, I think him being out for this amount of time really is going to be significant, and it is going to be something that really does affect the Angels here. Obviously, the Angels aren't going to be competing this year, but looking towards the future, I do think they want to compete sooner rather than later. If not, they probably would have forced out Mike Trout by now, but there still is some young pieces being grown here, like Logan O'Hoppe, like Nolan Shanuel, Mickey Moniak, Nelson Rada, Zach Neto. So there are some good hitting pieces here, and just the problem has been pitching for them throughout Trout's entire tenure and just with this franchise for the last few years. And with when one of your young pitchers do go down, who has shown a lot of potential in the past few years, it is unfortunate, and it's something that if you're an Angels fan, you do have to, just kind of like, damn, I mean, you just kind of beside yourself for. So Angels really have not had a good go of it these past few years. This franchise really has not been great, and overall, it is something that you are going to have to monitor for the rest of your time and just see what does happen with this franchise and see what happens with this Angels rotation. But there are still some good pieces here for this Angels team. It's just with Trout being out for the year, Sandoval being out for the year, it seems like that they just aren't going to compete. I've really expected them to, but I expect them to take a step up, and unfortunately, they have not. So, with the Angels now, again, I really haven't gotten much time to talk about them because they've just been bad, and since Trout was out, there really was no reason to talk about them. Ohtani left in the offseason, so really the big players, the big names, why you talk about the Angels really were not there anymore. So, overall, the Angels are an interesting team. Again, I think there is a good core building there, better than people might expect and people might say, but at the same time, it still wasn't great, and there still wasn't a great amount of players. So, overall, it is going to be interesting to see what the Angels do at the deadline. There are some pieces they could look to trade. I think Sandoval could have been a big one, but other than that, you could look at a guy like Brandon Drury. Drury hasn't had a good season this year with the Angels, but is in the last year of his contract. Provides some versatility on the infield and provides a good bat against lefty pitchers, and just good depth as well. I think if the Angels eat some of his contract, a team could look to end up adding Drury at this deadline and could look to trade for him. I think he's a really good player, even with what his numbers are showing. So I think that could be someone that gets something back for the Angels as well. Also, Joe Adell has been mentioned with the Angels in trading, which has been very, very interesting. Of course, Adell was a top prospect in baseball for a few years. I think was top 5 for a few years in a row actually with them, and just since he has come up has not been the guy we expected and really has underperformed very much so. But apparently teams really like his potential, and with the Angels not really competing and maybe trying to shuffle the score around, they could look to trade Adell, and that could be a very interesting addition to some team. I think a team that really isn't in a lot of pressure right now to win could look to add Adell and maybe try to get his potential up and kind of, maybe finally get the Joe Adell out of him that we all expected at one point. So overall, be a very, very interesting trade deadline to watch for this Angels team. I'll be very interested to see what does end up happening. And yeah, I'm very excited to see what does happen and who they do end up trading. Also, the bullpen, it should be an interesting one. They have trade pieces like Carlos Estevez, Matt Moore, who really is one of the bigger ones. Adam Simber could also be interesting. So overall, the Angels just, again, are very exciting. I didn't even mention Tyler Anderson, who I did a whole segment on. I think Anderson, again, could be a cheaper alternative to some other pitchers that are going to be out there. Has 2 years left in his contract. Maybe will regress a little bit, but still is going to be a very solid addition to any team. Just a very solid veteran arm that you can count on, and is a player that just, again, doesn't make bad starts, just goes out there, throws the ball, eats innings, and for a price that he might be at for the Angels might eat his contract, I think he would be a good addition to any team. And I think that overall Anderson could end up being a good trade target for a few teams. Now, when you're looking at this Angels team, you really have to think about the future. What does the future hold for this team? What does the future look like for this franchise? And is there a glimmer of hope? Now, if you're an Angels fan, it seems like there's been no hope for the past few years now with this team and what really has been end up happening with them, especially now with Ohtani leaving in the offseason. We all expected it, but just the way they neglected that situation and didn't really seem to face reality with the fact that he was going to leave, didn't end up trading him, didn't end up getting the haul that we expected them to get, because they were just like, no, he's not going to leave. Just was stupid and just a mismanagement. The Angels team, they still do have some pieces, don't really have any top prospects that you could look forward to right now. Nelson Rotter probably is their best one, I'd say, is a guy that I do think very highly of. I think he is very good. You also have some other guys like Caden Dana, Barrett Kent, Denzer Guzman, Dario Laverde. So there are some other pieces that could potentially be big in the future. But again, I think the guys already on the roster are going to be the big pieces. Mickey Moniak, Joe Adell if he stays there, Zach Neto, Nolan Schanuel, Logan O'Hoppe, these guys that have been first-round picks the past few years, top prospects for this franchise, and players that I do think can end up making a difference for this Angels team. So, really, if I'm an Angels fan, I'm looking at those guys already on the roster to make big strides and be big parts of this Angels team. I think overall, these guys are going to end up being very big pieces for this Angels team and this Angels future. and I'm very interested to see what will end up happening with them and what the future does look like for them and how they do end up performing. So yeah, I'm very excited to see what is going to happen with this franchise and what happens with this team, and just again, it's going to be a very interesting, exciting team to follow for the rest of the year, and I will be very interested to watch. So yeah, that is our fourth segment here for the day, going over Patrick Sandoval being out for the year with Tommy John surgery and just an overall outlook of the Angels as well. Moving into our fifth and final segment, which is going to be talking about some general news around the league, some topics that I didn't think were big enough to talk about as a full segment, but I still thought were significant enough to give my thoughts on and talk about. So yeah, going over that, and we'll see you after the break. So thanks, and bye.